Welcome to the Reed Smith podcast, Career Footprints.
In each episode of Career Footprints, we'll ask our guest, a Reed Smith alum, to share their career story, how their time at Reed Smith set them up for success, and their advice for early career lawyers.
Our goal is to surface insights from inspiring professionals' careers that will help you find your professional success, however you define that.
Welcome to another episode of Reed Smith's Alumni Career Footprints podcast. This is Lauren Hakala, Reed Smith's Global Director of Learning and Development. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by London office alum Naz Sachedina. Naz qualified as a solicitor at Reed Smith and then practiced for about 5 years in the structured finance team of our financial industry group. Her time at Reed Smith included 2 secondments, one with Barclays and then with Merrill Lynch. Since then, Naz's career has included 2 senior in-house legal posts. First as at counsel at Pinebridge Investments, and then as associate director and now director at WisdomTree Asset Management. Naz, welcome.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited for this conversation about your career. So I wanted to see if we could start by you telling us a little bit about your current role at WisdomTree and what you're doing now and what you like about it.
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I'm a director. I'm actually a director in the product legal team at WisdomTree. So that kind of means I cover the products and platforms rather than the kind of the corporate legal matters, which is covered by another part of our legal team. So WisdomTree in Europe has a very wide range of platforms and asset classes. So underlying assets kind of range from equities to commodities like oil and gold to crypto assets. We have physically backed platforms. We have synthetic platforms where swap counterparties provide exposure to the underlying assets through a swap. And all our platforms are all slightly different. So which means the mechanics, the way they operate are slightly different. That means kind of in my role, I cover the kind of lifespan of the product. So right from when you launch a product to when you do maintenance, like doing the prospectus rollover, if you have to make amendments, if you have to do security holder votes, right to the closure of a product. So it's kind of cradle to grave, as it were, for products. And I also undertake kind of wider projects within WisdomTree. So if we're making changes to a platform rather than specific products. So that's in a nutshell what I do at WisdomTree.
And keeping in mind that many of our audience are newly qualified lawyers and lawyers in their first 3 years of practice and knowing that you've been in their shoes, what's the best thing about your current role?
I never get bored, ever, just because of the range of assets and platforms. There's always something new happening, which is still a little terrifying. I remember asking Andre, this shout out to Andre Reed Smith, like, when do you feel comfortable? And he was like, you never do, Naz. So even though it's slightly terrifying, there are always new things to do, new things to learn. I love learning new things. I'm one of those really sad people that gets very excited by it. And also just, WisdomTree, not just the legal team, but the wider team are great as well. I love the legal team. They're awesome. Everyone I deal with are just really nice and very clever people. I always want to be the least clever person in the room, which I generally am. So that means I'm always learning, basically.
I love that point because I feel like as a junior lawyer, sometimes we think that after a couple of years, everything we'll know what we're doing and we'll just go to work and we'll do the same thing. And it sounds like for you, that's not the way it is. No. And that's a great thing.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things sometimes like, I wish I just did the same thing every day. But I know myself and people I know, like Naz, you'd get really bored. And I would 100% get really bored. So sometimes it's nice something that you're like, okay, I can do this. It's fine. But yeah, do that too much in it. Yeah, life does get a bit stale after a while. So yes, learning new things is apparently key in my life.
Well, knowing that you've landed in such a place that's so interesting and well suited for your interests, I want to now rewind and go back to the beginning of your career. So when you finished your studies, you attended University College London. You must have had plenty of options for where to do your training contract. And I'm curious, what did you think about when choosing a law firm and why did you ultimately choose Reed Smith?
Sure. So a lot of my peers were basically looking for the magic circle law firms, right? That was like the pinnacle of where you wanted to train. But then the more I talk to people kind of, when they come to your unis to try to get you to apply and try to understand what they did as a trainee, it just didn't sound very exciting. And I know, don't get me wrong, the life of a trainee is not supposed to be exciting, right? You're supposed to be learning. But even the work they were doing is like, I put amends through on documents and I do. And again, that's there's nothing wrong with that. But there was no scope seemingly to do more. Even when you kind of got to a third or fourth seat trainee, which is obviously when you're really hitting your stride. So I kind of decided I wanted not a Magic Circle law firm, but a really still good size firm that had a lot of coverage, did a lot of practice areas, was international because, that's always interesting as well. And also I kind of went by the trainee intake size. So Reed Smith, I should know this, had maybe, I'm going to get it wrong, aren't I? I think about 15 to 20 trainees. And that was a really good size because then there is going to be enough work for all trainees to do because you're not one of 150. So that means that if you kind of work hard and prove yourself, there's a chance to kind of get more exposure and do proper work rather than just putting men through documents, which again, it's necessary work and has to be done well. So that's why I decided to go with Reed Smith.
Well, that's fantastic. No, I hear that so much from our lawyers in our London office and also here in the US that our lawyers are really doing substantive work and thinking work from day one. And it sounds like you were super thoughtful about seeking that out. So once you arrived at Reed Smith, tell us about your trainee seats. Where did you rotate and how did you decide to land in the financial industry group?
Sure. So I did corporate as my first seat, and that actually, so I'm surprised actually when I look back on it how much thought I put into it, because I thought that was a good kind of foundational seat, right? It's not too specialized. You don't have to have a lot of background that as a law graduate you won't necessarily already have, but it gives you a good kind of breadth in terms of, especially the clients that Reed Smith has. There was like life sciences as well as kind of pure corporate clients, so you could do a lot of different things. And then I went on to comment to Barclays Asset Finance, and then I did obviously FIG Financial Industry Group as my third seat, and it was the classic. You have to think about your third seat because that's when you're your best performing. So you want to go to your third seat, the place you want to qualify. And then I did Commercial Disputes as my fourth seat. So that was kind of my thinking, mostly because I knew I wanted to qualify into FIG just because I was interested in financial services, basically.
Yeah, and I understand that you went well in FIG. You worked in what I think of as a highly specialized area of structured finance. So what was that like? How did you get up to speed?
I mean, looking back, to be honest, Lauren, it was a crazy but excellent in the end move, but crazy for me, to be honest. So the structured finance team had only just joined Reed Smith when I was a fourth seat trainee, so I couldn't actually annoyingly do a seat there. But I was really interested in the subject matter just because obviously at that point, just following the financial crisis and it was very much kind of in the news and in the zeitgeist. So I was very interested in those kinds of structures. And so I just applied knowing that I didn't have any experience, but please, I'm really interested. And thankfully the team took a chance and hired me. So I was lucky enough to be offered a job there. And in terms of how I got up to speed, I mean, I kind of just read as much as I could. So it did our classic, our good old friend PLC about the different kinds of transactions, right, that structured finance teams would kind of undertake to, at least so I'd go and have an understanding of what people were talking about rather than just sitting there shell shocked in the corner. And then when I was actually assigned to a transaction, if I was, for example, asked to look at a specific document, I would then on my own time look at the other documents as well, so I could understand how they fit together and how one impacted the other, and just kind of being really curious about the whole thing, just to understand, just because for my own edification, I wanted to understand how things worked so that when I was commenting on one thing, I could then see, well, if I do this here, that also means something else over here. So yeah, it was just being curious and reading a lot, unsurprisingly, Laura, in being a lawyer, but yeah.
No, I love that. I mean, I think as a junior lawyer, at least for me, I sometimes felt so out of control. Like there's all this new information, but it sounds like you've had a lot of confidence, right? To go and look.
Misplaced confidence, Lauren. Let's not get things confused and twisted. Certainly it was more just, I felt it was one of those, the more information I had, the safer I felt almost, right? So it was like, I'll just look at everything and then in the hope that I'll be able to kind of answer questions if they were kind of asked of me. So I wouldn't say confidence, Lauren. I would say more just wanting to not look like a complete idiot, basically.
Curiosity, right? Which you said.
Yes. Yeah.
So you mentioned that during your traineeship, you were seconded to Barclays, and seeing now in retrospect that you landed in an in-house role, I'd be curious to know what you learned from that experience and how that sort of contributed to your eventual decision to move in-house.
Sure. I think one of the things that kind of led me to want to do a secondment as a trainee is the whole point obviously is to get experience, right? And understand what you like and what you don't like. And so obviously, there are different routes in terms of a legal career, but certainly in my head, when you're really young and don't know better, it's very much private practice, in-house, and those are the only two routes. To go on a secondment just meant, well, at least I can see if I would be suited to an in-house career, if I would like it. So that was one of the main drivers, wanting to kind of understand if that's something I would want to do in the future. What did I learn? I learned a lot about, one, just the obvious thing, kind of how in-house teams are structured, what kind of work do they do, what's expected of in-house lawyers. And I was a second seat trainee, Lauren, so I was, still terrified, to be honest. And it was just because when you're on secondment, it does say trainee in your email title, but everyone kind of disregards that and just sees you as kind of qualified legal counsel. So, but it really improved my confidence just because it was such a massive learning curve. Because people took what you said as gospel, you had to then be confident yourself that what you were saying was correct, which meant you had to, understand exactly what they were talking about and exactly what the question was and what the impact. So you had to do a lot of kind of fact finding so you could be sure that you were giving the correct answer.
Yeah, no, I love that point about how you're the lawyer, right, in the conversation, even though you're brand new.
Yes.
How do you kind of prepare to make an impression? I mean, you talked about how you were reading and doing your own research and looking at all the documents. Is there anything special you did at Barclays to feel more confident about the answers you were giving?
I think it was more just, again, I'm going to just repeat myself this whole time, Lauren, being curious, right? And even on things that you weren't working on, when you had team meetings and people were discussing what they were doing, listening and then asking questions about what that meant. And, is there a document I can look at? And can I get more background onto what you were doing? And not in an annoying way, because in-house lawyers do not have time to sit there and give you background. But equally, if they can just send you a document that you can then read. And I think the other thing is just kind of, in terms of making an impression, again, being curious, but also trying to take the initiative, because as a when you go on a secondment as a trainee, thankfully, the people that are in-house know that you know very little. You're a trainee, so they know you're scared. So they give you one piece of work, right? And you do that one piece of work, but then you can also be like, okay, well, this is it. I think the next steps are going to be this. Would you like me to do them? Like, I've looked at this document. You've looked at the document. Would you like me to send it out? And then I can answer the questions. Like, just try to take the initiative and, show that you're not just there to do that one thing that they told you to do, but you're trying to be helpful and add value, basically.
No, I love that. Like the anticipating the next thing and offering it up, which I think is something that you so appreciate, especially when you are managing other people.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So you, after starting in your qualification seat with the Financial Industry Group, which we call FIG here at Reed Smith, for those who don't know, you had by all accounts, very successful practice for 5 years in the FIG group. You worked with some fantastic mentors at the firm who are leaders in their field and known to be particularly good at bringing up more junior lawyers. So I'm curious about that time in your career. What did you like most about your team, and what did you like about the work you were doing?
What I liked most about the team is that they knew so much collectively, because they had so much experience over different practice areas. There was I can't remember a time when when there was a random question and there wasn't someone in the team who could answer that question, or at least give you I would look here, and then you find out the answer. So it was such an amazing learning tool, because you're surrounded by people who have such breadth of experience now, and certainly, definitely then, and I'm sure now as well at FIG. So yeah, I think that's what I also really like the team. Like, they were a really good laugh. You could just have a chat with them. It wasn't just all about work, which is really helpful. So yeah, I do miss my time at Reed Smith. Not being as scared, when you didn't know what you were doing, but certainly, the people, I haven't forgotten them, and I'm still in touch with a lot of them, which is also really nice.
Oh, that's fantastic. You mentioned that you thought that you might be interested in-house roles from your traineeship. When did you realize, like, at what point in your career did you start to think it was time to think about next steps?
I kind of knew after the Barclays comment, I actually really knew that I enjoyed it. As scary as it was, and as challenging as it was, it improved my confidence. It made me realize that I could do this. and that I could go in-house. And so at that point, it just became, well, Naz, if you want to go in-house, what do you need to do? You need to get as much experience as you possibly can across everything that basically structured finance has to offer, which is what I tried to do. And it's obviously, because the scary thing about going in-house to a place that, with work you've never done before is thinking, God, am I going to be able to do this? And if you know that you've done a load of stuff before and you've managed to do it, that just gives you confidence to know that, well, I figured that out. I'm sure I can figure this out too.
And you talked about having some great mentors and team members you really liked and are still in touch with. So when you decided it was time to start looking for in-house roles in earnest, did you talk to them about that? How did you approach looking for roles? And did you tell anyone at the firm you were doing that?
Yes, I did. I was lucky enough. So Tamara Box, who's obviously was head of structured finance at that point, and obviously still in FIG now. I was very open with her. It was great. She, right from the outset, T-Box, sorry, I call her T-Box. I can't call her Tamara. It sounds weird. T-Box was very open to, people take different paths. Some people go in-house, some people stay in private practice, some people go to different firms. And she was very kind of encouraging of kind of discussions around that. So even before I decided I wanted to kind of leave, I asked her if there was an opportunity to do a secondment, for example, which is how I got my second secondment at Merrill Lynch. Yes, the T-Box was exceptionally supportive of the secondment, and both when I left as well. And it's great. I still get to work with her now, which is amazing.
That is great. So if there were an associate who wanted to start exploring in-house roles at the firm, what advice would you give them about starting a dialogue with their mentors?
So I would say two things. So one, aside from the kind of dialogue about that, is just try to get as much experience as you can. Like across different things, work with different partners, do different types of work, even if it's scary, even if you think, this doesn't have anything to do with anything I might be doing in the future, I want to do in the future, because you don't know how things transpire and you don't know things that will crop up in your future career that you randomly did 10 years ago that actually helps you. And then the second thing was, to be honest, just be as open as you can. Like, partners in law firms they're not going to make you feel bad for wanting to go in-house. Certainly those who understand that at some point you could be their client, right? So ask about secondment opportunities, with from partners in your team, if there are any, if there's anything you could do to be considered for a secondment opportunity. And also then when you actually do get to work with clients in private practice, make a good impression. Not that anyone obviously makes a bad impression, certainly, but really go the extra mile. Like, be personable, be responsive, be kind of understanding of what they want, and try to deliver that, so that if there is an opportunity to do a secondment there, they're going to be like, oh yes, I remember this person. They were great on that transaction. Sure, I'd love to have them in my team for a secondment. Like, that also really helps.
That's such great advice. I mean, we've all had times in our career when we're working very hard and things on a deal get heated up, but just always remembering that the person who you're serving in that moment, right? It's a chance to market yourself as a professional and the firm. And it sounds like you really did that.
I tried. I don't know if I succeeded, Lauren. I tried.
So you have a ton of wisdom that I think we could talk for a much longer time about the advice you have for more junior lawyers. But since we do only have a few minutes left in our time together, I want to ask you a couple of questions in your capacity now as a senior in-house lawyer. And the first one related to the last point we were discussing. But when you are working with junior lawyers at your outside counsel, can you talk about a few things that a junior lawyer has done during your time that's really impressed you and given you the impression that this is someone you really might want to work with again?
Sure. So the first is responsiveness. That annoying, a client sends an email and then you respond saying, hi, I've seen your email. The timelines are fine and we're working on it. That is a really pointless email to send, I know, because it seems so unnecessary. But to the person who's just giving you work to do, it's really nice to be like, okay, that person's seen it, they're dealing with it. I don't have to think about that anymore. So definitely responsiveness. I would also say attention to detail. As in-house lawyers, we don't expect, nor do we really want our partners to know the minutiae of transactions. Like, we don't want them to kind of be knee deep in the documents. So as a junior, my kind of advice would be immerse yourself in the documents. know what's been negotiated and know what the outcome was, or where we are currently with them if it hasn't been bottomed out yet. So if you're on a call and someone says, oh, where do we get to on the limitation of liability? You as a junior person can pipe, oh, this is where we've got to. And it shows that you know the documents and you're keeping track. And that is very impressive. And, it's good to know that someone's on top of these things. So that would be my advice.
So just that responsiveness and being the person who's kind of keeping everyone else organized.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. As a junior lawyer, that surprised me that was part of my role. But as the person who has the most time and probably the fewest matters compared to, I imagine you're working on a ton of matters at any given time.
Yes, basically. Yeah, it also can be quite daunting as a junior lawyer to be the person that's almost like the linchpin. But it's the classic, well, if you just break it down, right, you know what documents are being negotiated, you know who's working on them. If you kind of keep a track of what's the most back and forth, it's actually not that bad, but it can really yield a lot of results. And not just externally to your client, right, but also internally. It's very helpful to partners if there's a snapshot of what's going on, where are we? If you can deliver that shows, again, that you care. You're not just doing what you're told. You're really trying to kind of provide the best service both internally and externally.
And that point you made about how you don't necessarily want the partner to be the person who's up to date on all the details, right? For obvious reasons. And I think that's really powerful that someone, a senior in-house lawyer like you can actually notice when a junior is providing that very strong support to their more senior attorney.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, obviously, we don't want, partners to be negotiating limitation of liability clauses. It's a waste of their time as well as a waste of fees. I think there might be some kind of, I can understand that if you're a junior lawyer in private practice, you might be like, well, no one's going to know that I'm doing this and no one's going to no, I'm not going to get acknowledged. And it's not about acknowledgement, but, if you work hard, of course you want to get acknowledged for it. But, the partners at Reed Smith certainly, at least in my experience, have very much kind of acknowledged when the work has been done by someone else. And equally, on a call, it's very obvious, right, when a junior person can speak up and answer a question that they know what's going on. So that will be, even if no one on the call says, oh, wow, that's amazing, I'm so glad you know that, it will be noticed that it was you who was able to give that answer.
I think that's very motivating and reassuring, right? When you're working as perhaps the most junior person on the deal, to know that your work is really very meaningful to the client. So final question, and you've talked a little bit about what you did and what you think mid-level lawyers should be thinking about if they want to move in-house. But just speaking from the perspective of someone who might be assessing people who you're mentoring or who might want to join your team, what would you say to a mid-level lawyer about the skills that they should be developing if that is a path that they want to pursue?
So I think, and this is kind of a theme that I've seen certainly in the job that I'm in now, which is it's less about do you have experience in this particular asset class or this particular area. It's do you have the transferable skills to do this work if you're given the support and the tools that you need. For example, I did nothing. I had never done exchange traded product work in my life. Don't worry, I was very upfront about this in my interview, so this is not a surprise to anyone at WisdomTree. But, I was able to demonstrate because of the experience I had on the CLO work, on the securitization work, that I was able to look at complicated structures and problem solve and figure out answers. And that's what it really is about. It's about being able to apply the skills that you've learned elsewhere to the job that you're doing now, because no one has done everything. And it's certainly an in-house counsel, as I said before, you will end up doing things that no one has ever thought about, that hasn't really been contemplated. That I'm not even being facetious. Certainly in the crypto space, for example, we're definitely doing things that have never been done before. And so it's not about do you have the experience, because no one had the experience. It's about how can you approach this and will you be able to do this well? And that is very much based on the skills that you have, your ability to kind of problem solve, your ability to approach something and be able to kind of break it down to some of its parts and understand it and then figure out a way to deal with the problem or the best way to do a project or something. So my advice would basically be try not to get fixated. It's very difficult, but try not to get fixated on the area itself and getting experience directly in that area. But get as much experience as you can, then be able to demonstrate how the experience that you have will mean that you'll be able to do the job that you're applying for very well.
I love that. So earlier you talked about being someone who loved learning. And it sounds like that is the skill that you're looking for in people who want to work with you.
Yes, for sure. Like enthusiasm and curiosity and wanting to be challenged. And don't get me wrong, challenge is not easy. There are certain days when, the things you're doing are hard and it makes your brain hurt. But once it's done, it's a really nice feeling to be like, yeah, we did that. We as a team were able to accomplish that. And it's a really nice feeling. So yes, definitely.
Well, Naz, thank you so much. We are at the end of our time together, but I want to thank you for sharing so much from your perspective as an alumni of the firm and a senior in-house lawyer and someone who started their career at Reed Smith and made a very intentional decision to join the team. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining this episode of Reed Smith's Career Footprints podcast. And we hope to see you at following episode.
Career Footprints is a Reed Smith production. Our producer is Ali McCardle.
This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast, Podbeam, and reedsmith.com. To learn more about Reed Smith's Alumni Network, or if you're an alum of the firm who wants to share your career story, contact me, Reed Smith's Global Senior Director of Alumni Relations, Laura Carmatz, at alumni@reedsmith.com.
This podcast is provided for educational purposes. It does not constitute legal advice and is not intended to establish an attorney-client relationship, nor is it intended to suggest or establish standards of care applicable to particular lawyers in any given situation. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. Any views, opinions, or comments made by any external guest speaker are not to be attributed to Reed Smith LLP or its individual lawyers. All rights reserved.